Well, welcome to Real Estate 101. I'm just kidding. It's not Real Estate 101. But today's topic does have a relationship with real estate photography. Today we're going to be talking about exposure bracketing, exactly what it is and how you can use it to enhance your imagery. So let's get to it. So let's talk about what exposure bracketing is. Exposure bracketing is the scale that you see on your camera that looks like this. Now, what that is showing is the exposure points to the image that you're taking. Initially, you have the perfect exposure and you're taking that photograph. But when you're doing bracketing, you want to underexpose that photograph and take a picture, and you want to overexpose that photograph and take the picture. Now, in some of the modern cameras, they have auto exposure bracketing where you can set it and it will automatically take the number of pictures that you preset in that menu. It can take 3 pictures, it can take 5 pictures, it can take 7 pictures, and it's going to go from a extremely high exposure to extremely low exposure and capture all that imagery that later on you can use software to put into one picture. So that, for all purposes, is what the exposure bracketing is. Now, you might have an older model camera that doesn't have the auto exposure bracketing feature, but even with the older model ones, you can underexpose your photograph, take the picture, regular exposure and then overexposure. You don't have to have the auto bracketing feature in the camera to be able to do this, to be able to create your exposure bracketing image. That being said, with everything else that's going on, technology has really gotten to the point where less and less you may need to use this. Regardless, if you need to use it, you need to know how it works. So let's get to the computer and see what happens when you use this exposure bracketing technique. At this point, you've captured your images and you have transferred them to the file where you're going to put them all together. And you can have 3 images. 3 images are fine. You can, once again, have 5 images or 7 images, but for all practical purposes, 3 are all you need. Now I'm going to use this Photomax Essential software, and I'm going to bring in 5 images because it will give you a preview and show you what is happening in the preview when you bring in your imagery. So I'm going to bring in a very overexposed image and then exposures that were set in the automatic features that gave me 5 different exposures ranging from overexposed to underexposed. And as you notice in the preview, it has stacked all these together. Now I can hit next and it will go into another menu which will have a bunch of things that I can tweak in to do to the imagery, and it will compile them all and give me my final image. So now I'll give you an example of what the final image looks like. This is your standard image. This is if you went in and set everything up, and this is the exposure you would normally get. I want you to notice in this exposure that the areas around the dinette is very dark. There's darkness underneath this table. There's darkness at this edge of the couch. And in itself, this would be probably an all right image for the real estate agent. But because you used the exposure bracketing, you can end up with quite a better image that we see here on the right hand side. Once again, comparing the 2 images, if you look at this dinette, you can see it now. It's very clear. There's virtually no shadowing and no darkness underneath this table. The clarity in the reflection from what's in the front yard in this mirror is even more enhanced than the original photograph. And the frame in the original photograph, it was almost just black, a very dark bronze color. But in reality, this is what it was. It was a lighter color bronze. And you can see it now because you did the exposure bracketing. And this gives you just top of the line imagery. And it is something you really need to know how to do. Now, that being said, I had also said because of technology in the cameras that things are changing a little bit concerning this exposure bracketing. Still good to know. You still need to know how to do it. Let's go to that one of the same images that we just looked at. This is the one that was incredibly underexposed. Now, if you were going to do an adjustment on a photograph, course, this wouldn't be the one you pick. You would pick something a little closer to the original exposure. But let me show you what happens, because that camera is picking up a dynamic range within this photograph that we don't even see initially here. This looks like, you know, of course, some highlights with the ceiling lights in the top, but everything else looks basically black. Let's change the exposure on this photograph, this one photograph, and let's let that dynamic range be picked up in this photograph. So I'm not going to go all the way because that would overexpose it, but here's that one image that was incredibly dark, but because of the dynamic range these new cameras can pick up, it has created a very good image. Now, of course, I would prefer to have picked one that was a little closer to the right exposure and then tweaked it in using the software. But this is just an example of why the software and the technology of the camera is kind of putting the exposure bracketing a little bit on the back burner. Learn it still. Know how to use it. It is something you need to know how to do, and then use it whenever you have the opportunity to create the imagery you really, really want. I want to thank you for watching this video. Once again, if you would please subscribe, like, or share it, I would appreciate that a lot. And I hope you have a great day.